What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Orange County. This is season 19, episode 5. Didn't feel like getting on camera. Like I told y'all in my Miami review, it's a lot going on here, okay? So I'm trying to stay consistent and up to date. So let's get into this review. So y'all know sometimes before we get in to the review, we get a little spicy just a little bit, okay? And I just got a few things I want to talk to you guys about. So first up is an update. If you watched my last review of Real Housewives of Orange County, in the spicy corner, we talked about this video that Gretchen and Jen posted that caused a lot of controversy. Some people felt that it was racist, racially insensitive, tone deaf. I believe that it was extremely tone deaf, okay? Other people felt like Katie was reaching and the people that supported her was reaching. Well, I told you guys that I would give you an update about that situation if there was an update that came, and we have one. So let me play the video to give you the context, and then we will get into the update.
Back on Housewives? We're ready to defend ourselves. Yeah!
So let's get into the updates, okay? So first up, let's talk about Jen, because Jen was asked about if she was going to address this in her comments, and I want to read her response, as well as she responded to people asking her questions in her Insta story. So first up, let's get into the comments. So shouts out to the Twitter user by the name of Cindy C's. She got these screenshots, so I want to get into them. So she said this: Jennifer responds to the backlash on the video she posted with Gretchen, hashtag RHOC. So a user on Instagram said this: I feel bad for Katie. The anti-Asian video was very hurtful and disappointing. Jim responded to this person by saying, truly sorry you feel that way. Then another person said, what a disappointing response. Lost a fan. So then Jim responded to that person by saying, I hate that more than you know, but listen, fans for people that are willing to use racism to attack other people are not for me anyway. The second I heard that the post was insensitive, it was off my IG, sending my best. Then another Instagram user said, are you going to address the problematic Kung Fu video you and Gretchen posted and then deleted? And Jim responded by saying, of course, it was offensive to two of my cast and possibly others. I was asked to take it down and I did immediately. Never an ill intended at all. Truly, we were being goofy and having fun. The second I heard it could come off offensive, it was off of my socials. So this response is better than the one that she said earlier on, talking about fans for people that are willing to use racism to attack others are not for me anyway. Well, you should be attacked if you're being racist. So I'm just, what are we talking about, Jen? But the second response was way better. So let's get into her Insta stories. So somebody asked her this: let's talk about it, baby. Did you really not think your video with Gretchen was offensive? And Jen responded by saying, I'm not racist. The second I heard the video could be taken as offensive, I removed it immediately. Gretchen and I were being silly, never an intent to hurt anyone. So I'm glad Jen addressed this situation, because I feel like her and Gretchen, to me, were taking too long. If someone was accusing me of doing something that was deemed racist or racially insensitive or bigoted or, any other isms, I would address it the day that it was gaining traction. I felt like they kind of waited a little too long if I was them, because you're not going to slap me with that label, okay, and I not push back against it, especially if I did not mean for it to be ill-intended. I was expecting them to put out some type of statement, but most of the things that she said were in her comments, and then we have this one instance where she spoke about it in her Insta story. So moving on, let's talk about Gretchen, because Gretchen did the same thing where she responded to people in her comments. So the first comment goes like this. So if I understand this correctly, the video of Jen and Gretchen complaining about other housewives, and then they start karate chopping and kicking a punching bag, and then the overlay music is kung fu music. I'm the first person to call out racism or racist behavior, but this seems like a stretch. So then Gretchen responded to this person by saying, not true. When we heard she was offended by the video, we immediately took it down. And I also sent her an apology text saying this video was not directed towards her at all. And they're referring to Katie. So it continues on with another user saying this: two blonde Barbie wannabes at Gretchen Rossi and Jen making fun of Asian people, including the beautiful and gorgeous Katie, for no reason whatsoever. I'm glad, however, that at Gretchen Rossi took down the video and apologized to Katie. So then Gretchen responds to this person by saying the video was not directed towards Katie or Asian people at all. It was about Housewives drama. No ill intent was meant. That's why we took it down. Side note, I hate when people comment and then they add the person that they're commenting about, and then they get mad when that person responds to them. You wanted mess, you wanted drama. You could have made this comment without adding Gretchen. And then you get butthurt because Gretchen responds to you. That's stupid. So the last comment we're going to get into is a person saying this: I love Katie. I don't feel the video was hating on Asians. I think they were channeling Bruce Lee to kick some Tamra butt, like the song Kung Fu Fighting. And then she says, exactly. So again, I will say and reiterate what I said last time. I'm not Asian, so I'm not going to tell Asian people what they can and cannot be offended by, because I hate when people try to tell Black people what they can and can't be offended by. Now, if you're Asian and you didn't find any offense about it, that is totally on you, and you reserve that right to feel that way. I didn't think the video was racially insensitive, but I definitely thought it was tone deaf. I'm glad they at least can acknowledge that they made a video and that it wasn't ill intended, but immediately took it down when they saw the video was causing harm. But I felt like there could have been a better way to address it, like making a statement. But it is what it is at this point. So moving on. Let's talk about Katie, okay? So this is also an update because I did an update for Heather. So y'all know, and I think my second or first episode, Spicy Corner, I read you off this tweet that was taken, or an excerpt or a summarization of what was discussed in this article, that they were alleging that Katie and Heather probably were not going to return for season 20. I did an update with Heather where Heather basically says that, like, I'm good. Like, I'll let y'all know if I don't want to return. And we have an update with Katie as well that I want to play for you guys. So Katie did an interview with The Decider, and the interviewer asked her about if she still has misgivings or misfeelings about coming back for season 20 if asked. So let me play that video for you guys.
I talked to Tamara. She said that Jen eventually turns on you. What can you say about that, and where does your friendship with her stand today?
It's unfortunate, but Jen and I are not as close as we were last year.
Even though your castmates are trying to give you this villain arc this season, the internet has really been on your side. What has that support meant to you?
Well, when you're filming it and then waiting for it to be edited and aired, it's just so much anxiety. You don't know how you're going to be received. So I'm very grateful. I'm so thankful because you just don't know, and I've gotten so much support.
When I spoke to you last year, you said there was a 50-50 chance you would want to return for another season. What are those chances looking like for season 20?
You know, I think I'd love to return and actually get the women that I would be with to actually get to know me, because I don't think I've been afforded that yet.
So if I remember correctly, I said that I could see Katie walking away from this show based off of the women and how they're treating her. But I definitely felt like production would ask her back. So to hear her now say, like, no, I'm willing to come back, I think she'll be back for season 20, just like Heather will be back for season 20. What I disagree with in her statement is her saying that, like, these women haven't given her an opportunity, or she doesn't feel like she's had the opportunity for the ladies to get to know her. I think she needs to take ownership of that, because at the end of the day, Katie, you came into last season wrong. Having that beef with Heather about the Sutton's Christmas party snub, and then the paparazzi when you weren't even there last season for the paparazzi argument and beef, then the whole situation with your daughter and Emily and Emily's kids, that didn't really help you. And then we get to the reunion, and then after the reunion plays out, you're talking to bloggers and things of that nature. You set yourself up for failure. And you got to own that. I feel like you have to own that. Now, if she does come back, I wonder who she'll be cool with. It seems like her and Tamara are in a good place. And that's probably because Jen and Katie fell out. But I'm wondering who Katie will consider a friend or an ally for season 20. Okay? So let's move on to our next thing. So let's talk about Watch What Happens Live. So Gina was on Watch What Happens Live, and she thought she was dropping tea on Heather, but it was very lukewarm. So let me play that clip for you guys.
Wants to know why you're upset with Katie for supplying a blogger info to Emily's former nanny, but not at Emily for bringing up Katie's custody, something that was never discussed on the show, but Emily researched simply to hurt Katie. We got this a lot.
Okay, well, first of all, what I would say is I did tell Emily at the table, you should apologize for digging into her past.
Okay.
Like, I do say when I think that things are out of bounds, I think that's out of bounds. Also, I think you guys would be surprised to hear this, but Emily did not do the research for that. Emily is not the one who knew about that. She was told about that right before the reunion.
Who did the research?
It was Deborah.
It was Dubrow.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yes. And I love her, but she's the one who told Emily about it. That's just the truth. Yeah, I don't
So Heather saw this and she responded to Gina. So shouts out to Gibson John because he was the one that caught this. He posted a screenshot of Heather's response to Gina, and he captioned the tweet saying, Heather reacts to Gina's claims that she researched Katie's past and told Emily about it ahead of the last RHOC reunion. So this is what Heather said. She said, let's set the record straight. First of all, I do not research anyone. That is not my MO. I do not have the time or interest to try to dig something up on other people. For the reunion last year, there were a lot of stories in the media circling about Katie, and some of us were sending them to each other because it was overwhelming and crazy. I did, in fact, send the article about Katie's custody to Emily. I did nothing more than that, and I would never have brought this up at the reunion. I actually went up to Katie during the commercial break and said to her, this must have been a very difficult time for you. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I never would have brought this up. Kids and careers are off limits. Not really sure why Gina chose to include me in her response on the show or make it sound salacious, but it was not. And this is why I don't understand why Heather wants to be cool with Gina or Emily, because at every turn, they show her that they don't really like her. Since season 17 and 18, Emily and Gina have always had this unnecessary shade that they throw at her. They always have critiques about how Heather spends her money or how she speaks to them. And don't get me wrong, Heather is pretentious. She's snobby. We call her Miss Fancy Pants. We know how she gets down, but she's never been malicious towards Emily or Gina. And they always, in my opinion, go out their way to purposely misunderstand her. And when I saw this, I was like, Gina, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to rope Heather into the Emily situation? Are you trying to get the heat off of Emily? At the end of the day, Emily is the one that brought the story to the stage. Now, I'm not putting it past Heather to like send that story to Emily and be like, girl, I'm just giving you the tea. Do with it as you want. But at the end of the day, Emily is a grown woman. And if she chose that was the time for her to throw that information out there, it's out there. On top of that, Heather did not have to go digging for that information because the stories were coming out about Katie left and right, and I covered them on my channel. The first story we talked about was the road rage incident that Heather brought up at the reunion last year. Then the next story we talked about was the custody situation over here, and that was the story that Emily brought up. Then the last story I remember gaining a lot of traction was that Katie was being sued by her and her husband by a mutual friend or maybe a business partner that felt like Katie and her husband were doing some type of copyright infringement, or they actually stole their golf ball shot glass idea. So I didn't have to go digging for those stories. They were all over the blogs and even in news sites like In Touch Weekly, and it's In Touch Weekly. Another one is like US Weekly. So I'm like, Gina, yeah, I want Heather to stop thinking that those two women are her friends. I I just want her to stop because they don't like you. They don't like you. They just don't like you, Heather. Leave them people where they at. So the last thing we're going to talk about is Jen and Tamra because they were answering questions in their Insta stories. So first up, let's talk about Jen. Okay. So somebody asked Jen, did you unfollow Tamra? And she said, no, she blocked me again. And then she put the yawning emoji and she put a block sign. So let's get into Tamra. Somebody asked her, watching people belittle your trauma due to circumstances of their own making is bizarre. And then she said, then people wonder why I keep my feelings to myself. But Tamara, your behavior is the reason why people don't believe you. So that's your problem as well. That's your fault. Next we have someone said, I don't think you have a single friend on the cast. They all use you to deflect. And so she responded by saying, starting to feel that way, especially at my lowest. Heather is always there for me. And then she put heart emojis. Then another question was, why did Gretchen come back if she doesn't want to move on? And then Tamara said, clearly stuck in the past, blaming me for stuff that was public knowledge. Yeah, but you also have yet to genuinely apologize and mean what you say when you apologize and change your behavior. So I don't really have a problem with Gretchen saying that, like, I don't forgive her and I don't really feel like I need to move on with her because there's enough people in this group that I get along with. And the final question is, you really did not want to be there on that episode. Hope you feel better soon, XO. And then she said, it was very difficult since I was just in New Orleans a few weeks prior. And she's referring to what happened to Teddy. So that's all I got for you guys. So let's get into this review. All right, y'all. So let's get into this review. So it opens up and we find out that Gina is having a housewarming party and all of the women are invited. I think the first couple of ladies to show up is Emily, Katie, Jen, and Gretchen. We actually see a house tour. And I will say, after seeing the house with actual stuff in there, it looks really nice. Without the stuff, the first episode when we saw Gina in the house, I was like, this house still looks small. But seeing all the stuff in the house, I was like, okay, no, it is big enough for your family. And I think there's also a basement. And I liked what Emily said when she was like, this house is like a visual representation of Gina's growth. And I agree with that. Because if you think about it, when we met Gina, she was married to Matt. I think that's her ex-husband's name. Then we found out that Matt was cheating on her. They had that DV situation. Then she got her DUI, and we saw the ups and downs of, having to get a divorce. The DV and the DUI all kind of happening all at once at her, and her kind of floating around trying to figure out what to do. Then she meets Travis, and that situation is kind of like, I don't know, girl. But we now see that she is doing very well in real estate. She got her footing now. So I agree with Emily. This house is a clear representation of Gina's growth. Now, did Travis help her buy that house? I don't believe so, because I still don't really know what Travis does. They keep saying that he does real estate as well, but to be honest, I feel like they just say that for the show. I also feel like anytime Gina talks about herself and the accomplishments that she's done, she always like feeds Travis into that. And he's like, well, Travis has done this too. And I'm like, girl, it's kind of giving you're trying to hype your man up, because if people really knew how you are the one taking care of everything, they would tell you to believe him. That's what it gives to me, okay? So after we see the girls walk around the house, we see them in the kitchen huddled around, and they're all pretty much talking. The food spread that they had actually looked really good. So I think it was either Gretchen or Gina that asked Jen about the conversation that she had with Tamra. And Jen is like, well, yeah, me and Tamara met up after Heather's party, but it really didn't go anywhere. She started to say that I'm obsessed with her, that I'm giving single white female. And Gretchen is like, really? And, I'm going to the same gym as her. I'm doing all this stuff. So then Gina interjects and she's like, well, I talked to Heather and Heather told me that Tamara showed a fatty photo of you. And Gretchen is gagged. She was like, "Are you serious?" She's like, "She really did that?" So then Jen is in her confessional saying, "In what world or in what way are you doing therapy and you still find time to like dig around and pull up like a fat photo of me?" Then you have Emily in her confessional saying, "Well, I have a lot of fat photos. I post them." And to be honest, Emily isn't fat. She may have been large, but she's not fat in my mind. And neither is the picture that they keep saying is a fatty photo of Jen. That lady looks every bit of like she can fit in a 6 or an 8. When the average woman in America, I think, wears a size like 18 or higher. So both Emily and Jen will still be considered like slim builds or relatively like average size, not fat, if you ask me. So we then see Heather pull up. Heather brings this really nice gift, and I think it's like that ice cream maker that I've been seeing all over TikTok. It's like a coffee maker and ice cream and slushy maker. And everyone's asking Heather, "So how was Paris?" Because we found out that Heather went to Paris to visit her daughter, Max, that lives in Paris. And Heather was like, "Girl, I was only there for 2.5 days." And everyone's like, "Oh, it must be nice." Then we see Tamara pull up. Tamara's talking about like her social anxiety is heightened since she had her sit down with Jen. And she was like, she doesn't know what's going to happen when she gets into these groups because she is expecting everybody to come at her. And when Tamara said that, I was like, the anxiety you feel is probably how some women feel when they're around you, Tamara. They don't know if you're going to come at them or not. Maybe you should actually sit with that feeling and actually analyze it and realize that you have made people feel the same way. And it's not great. It's not, okay? So she comes into the house. It is awkward AF. Jen and Gretchen don't really want to speak to her. You can tell that Tamara is nervous and uncomfortable. You even have Heather in her confessional saying, "This is effing awkward. It's weird." And I agree. So I think it was Gretchen who ends up breaking up the tension by saying, "Well, Gina, what do you like most about your house?" And she was like, "It's really nice to have a pantry." Then they hear a knock at the door, and it is Shannon. Shannon ends up bringing like, I think, 10 lemons and salt. I do know that's supposed to like, it's supposed to ward off negative energy and like, cleanse a space. So Gina was appreciative, but also she had an issue with Shannon saying that the house was nice. And she felt like it was basically an underwhelming response. But I feel like, Gina, your house compared to the houses that they have been in is a nice house. You are talking to Shannon, who was like one of the wealthiest women on this show. If you go back and look at the house that Shannon and David and her daughters, like, their childhood home, that was a huge house. So I don't think that Shannon was being rude in any way to be like, "Oh, this is nice. It's nice for you, Gina." I don't know what you're expecting from the lady. Like, do you want her to be like, "Oh, your house is finally big enough for your family. Y'all aren't sleeping on top of each other. Be glad for the compliment, girl." So next thing you know, we end up seeing the women break into groups. So I think it's Katie, Gretchen, Gina, and Tamara sitting inside the house, and the rest of the ladies are outside. So we actually see this conversation happening between Tamara and the women, where she talks about Teddy's surgery. Around this time is where Teddy had her brain surgery. Unfortunately, they could not remove all the tumors. I think she ended up still having 4 tumors still on her brain. So as the conversation continues, Tamara brings up about how 3 weeks ago they were down in New Orleans, and unfortunately Teddy ended up falling, and I think that was one of the contributing factors as to why she decided to, I guess, go seek help, because I guess that's also around the time where she wasn't sure if she had brain cancer or not. So all of the women are at the table like, "Oh my goodness." So then we see the ladies that are outside, which is Jen, Emily, Heather, and Shannon. Jen brings up how she had a conversation with Gina, and she's telling Heather, "I had a conversation with Gina, and Gina informed me that Tamara was showing you a picture of me when I was fat." And Heather doesn't deny it. She's like, "Well, yeah, she showed me like a before and after picture of you." And Jen is like, for what, Heather? And she was like, did she show you to be kind? Like, what was the point of her showing you that? And so Heather is like, well, honestly, she showed me the picture to like be like, you kind of are obsessed with her, or trying to explain to me her reasoning why she feels like you're obsessed with her. So then Jen is like, girl, that's bullshit. There was no reason for her to show you that picture. So then in her confessional, Jen is saying Heather is always going to bat for Tamra, and it just doesn't make any sense. She was like, the only thing I can think of is that she's scared of her because she knows what she's capable of. Then Jen is like, you know what, Heather, you've been bamboozled. And Heather is actually like surprised that she said that to her. And I'm like, well, Heather, what did you expect? Like, you're not really condemning Tamra's actions for showing you a picture of this lady when she didn't really like her body. So then Shannon ends up saying, honestly, Heather is going to keep getting herself in trouble by trying to take up for Tamra. It's not a great position to be in, and you just end up hurting yourself. And then she does Tamra's iconic, "It's my opinion" scream. And I thought that was hilarious. That was hilarious. So then Jen tells the women, she was like, that's effed up. You don't do that to another woman. But then when they showed the pictures again, to me, Jen does not even look fat. It's just a flared out top. But in Orange County, body standards are very different. There, if you're not shaped like a Barbie, then you're fat. Okay. So then Heather says in her confessional, she really likes Jen, but does Jen take up for her when Katie says disrespectful things about her? I'm pretty sure she doesn't. And honestly, I wouldn't care if she did or did not take up for me. Here's the thing about Jen. I don't understand why she is expecting Heather to reprimand, punish, or really chastise Tamra's behavior if she keeps saying that the lady is afraid of Tamra. Because my thing about it is, if somebody is afraid of something or someone, I would not expect them to punish, reprimand, or really stand up to that thing that they're afraid of until they got the courage to. But I've told y'all this before. I don't think Heather is afraid of Tamra. I think Heather knows Tamra for her works, and she sees her for who she is. And instead of just leaving her where she's at, she just accepted it. Like a lot of people said, you can take or leave me as I am. And I think Heather is like, this is who Tamra is, and I can either accept it, or I can ignore it, or I can fight with her. And I think she just accepted it. And I think what's bothering Jen is that she genuinely likes Heather and thinks Heather is a good person, but she doesn't understand how this person that she likes can still want and be friends with someone that she feels like has caused so much harm and chaos in her life. I think that's what's really getting at Jen. But I think Jen has to understand that Tamra and Heather have known each other since season 7, and we're on season 19. It hasn't always been the best relationship. There definitely has been times where Heather and Tamra have gone at it with each other, but there's history there compared to Jen and Tamra, which I think they had only been friends when they got to the show, at least for like 2 years. And now they're on like year 3 or 4. So it's easier for Jen to drop Tamra where she's at because the history isn't strong there, and also the harm that Tamra did to her. But I think Heather is just like, I know Tamra for her works, and I'm cool with just being cool with her. So we go back into the house, and they start talking about the conversation that Tamra and Jen had the episode prior. And they were like, well, how did the conversation go? And Tamra basically says, it didn't really go great. It went south very quickly. And she started calling me names. So then Gretchen was like, did you really call her single white female? And Tamara's like, yes, I did. And Tamara goes on to say, well, she brought it up at the table saying, I heard you've been going around town saying I'm obsessed with you. And I say, yeah, I feel like you are. You're reaching out to people that don't like me and don't really want to be around me. And then Gretchen had a blonde moment because Gretchen goes, like who? And Tamara said, like you. And I said, yeah, Gretchen, you are very vocal about how you don't like Tamara. What were you expecting? And so Gretchen was like, honestly, she didn't really reach out to me to like get dirt on you. She just asked me for counseling. And then she goes on to say, like, well, girl, you're the one that said that Ryan's house got raided by the FBI. And Tamara says, well, I apologize for that. And then Gretchen points out like a really good point. You apologize, but you still repeated the same behavior. Because then she brings up, well, you didn't learn anything from that because you did the same thing to Ryan again, where you got on, well, she didn't say this part, where she got on Watch What Happens Live and she said she misspoke about the Shohei Ohtani case because the FBI gambling comment was done on the show last season. So then you hear Katie in her confessional like say, for the love of God, Tamara, like for once own something that you have done. So then Tamara was like, you know what, Gretchen, I don't want to go back and forth with you because you've been coming after me for the past 12 years. So then Gretchen ends up telling Tamara, girl, you're delusional. You are delusional and I don't have time for that. So she actually gets up and goes outside with the other ladies. And she was like, can I sit outside with y'all? Because I don't really want to be around a delusional person. And they're like, y'all talking about Tamara? And she's like, yeah, I'm talking about Tamara. So then Emily brings up the whole like Facebook situation with Gretchen commenting under Tamara's estranged daughter Sydney's post about her. And she was like, well, have you apologized to her? And Gretchen said no. And Emily's like, well, if you apologize, it just shows that you're the bigger person. And I'm not going to lie. I liked what Gretchen said, where she was like, you can't reason with somebody that's whacked out. And she goes on to say, honestly, I don't care to be the bigger person. I want to stoop to her level. And I agree with that. Sometimes being the bigger person doesn't get your point across. Sometimes you have to show people like you're not to be messed with, you're not to be played with. And sometimes, like Gertie said, like Michelle Obama said, when they go low, you're supposed to go high, but sometimes when they go low, you got to go lower. And that's what it is. Because with someone like Tamara, you have to fight fire with more fire to get her to really back up off you. And so I don't really have a problem with Gretchen being like, girl, I can play with you all day if you go there with me. I don't get why Emily is so focused on Tamara and Gretchen making amends or somewhat being cool with each other. This is like the third, no, I think it is the third time we've seen Emily say, well, Gretchen, did you have a conversation with Tamara? Tamara, did you have a conversation with Gretchen? It's like, they don't need to be friends. If they can coexist, that's fine. If you ask me, I'm not really interested in seeing them hash out a 12-year-old beef because to me, everything that could be said has been said between them. Like, I don't care if they're friends or not, but I wonder if Emily wants them to be cool so she can be cool with Gretchen, because remember, Emily and Gretchen actually were working on a friendship until Emily and Tamara fell out because Tamara had an issue with Emily being friends with Gretchen. So I'm wondering if that's the reason why she's so focused on the two of them like being cordial. But honestly, I don't care about them being, like I said, I don't care about them being cool with one another. I don't even really care about their feud. It's not entertaining to me. Also, I will say Emily has a nice ass. She goes into the house and shows everyone her ass. And it is nice. But I was just like, why are we looking at this? We then see Gina gift everybody these black boxes and she tells them to go outside. And she runs upstairs. She has on like a Mardi Gras mask. And then she starts blowing out of one of the toy trumpets. And she tells all of them that, you guys know we're going to Mardi Gras. Everybody is excited and things of that nature. And then next thing you know, you see Tamara get very like somber and quiet and she walks into the house and Gina walks down the steps and she's like, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? And she's just like, it's just a lot. And she brings up how we just left New Orleans and that's where we found out that Teddy was sick. And she's trying not to cry, but you can tell that Tamara is about to cry. And Gina says, she hasn't known Tamara to be like an emotional person. And seeing her actually like trying to fight back tears, she was just like, I can tell that she's really struggling with this. We then see Tamara in the confessional basically saying that she is just trying to stay positive. hoping that the bad thoughts go away, saying that, my friend's gonna make it, she's gonna make it, and all of that stuff. While the women are trying to console Tamara, you see Gretchen, Jen, and Katie, but more so Gretchen and Jen having a conversation where Gretchen said she's really good at playing the victim. I can understand how some people feel as though Tamara is using Teddy's diagnosis as a storyline or to justify her actions. And I don't think it's wrong for people to have reservations about Tamara, because Tamara always claims that she's going to change and that she's been having a transformative year and she's not the old Tamara, she's the new one, but yet she reverts back to the same behavior. But I also don't want to negate how challenging it has to be to think that one day you'll get a phone call that your friend has passed away due to brain cancer. So the next couple of scenes we get are with the ladies with their families. We see Tamara and her daughter Sophia. She's on her, I think it was a Spotify account, and she was looking at how many monthly listeners she has because she is doing music, and she actually has 1,000 monthly listeners. And Tamara was so proud of her, which I think that is an accomplishment to have people listening to you. I mean, my YouTube channel is very small, but I'm appreciative to the 2,000 plus people that I have like watching and engaging with my content. So I think she should be proud of herself. Tamara ends up asking her, like, can I be in one of your songs? And that girl was like, girl, you don't put lipstick on a pig and call it something. I'm not doing that. And Tamara was like, you can't put auto-tune on it. And she was like, no, ma'am. So I thought that was funny. We then see Katie with her son Gavin, and they're talking about how great of a big brother he has been, how she is just ecstatic for him to stay at home. She doesn't really want him to go. She was like, you know what, we can build a compound and everybody just lives together. We then see Emily, Shane, and their two sons. When I tell you, those little boys are a carbon copy of Shane. Like when the camera panned to both of the twins and then it panned back to Shane, I said, wow, Emily, did your genes do anything? Like, this was a group project and you definitely didn't pull your weight. They're just like so small and tiny and adorable. Emily starts talking about how she feels as though Luke is codependent on her. And she also feels like she's betraying him by going out and hanging out with her friends. She ends up telling the boys to leave the kitchen so that she can have a conversation with Shane. She basically tells Shane that Luke is clearly on the spectrum. And Shane basically tells her, yeah, he probably is, but we'll definitely find out in the next 2 weeks because we find out that they did an evaluation on him, which is good. Emily says in her confessional that she feels like she's failing him. She brings up the struggle of what it means to like maintain basically an identity and a sense of self as a parent, because she's struggling with mom guilt for wanting to have a life outside of her kids, but also wanting to be there for her son, but feeling like she's not doing the right thing or making the right moves. We get back to the conversation that she has with Shane, and Shane basically tells her, we'll figure out what we need to do once we get enough information. And it is important that there's one parent that is not spiraling out or managing this situation better. I will say, Emily, this was not a good confessional. I don't know who told you to put this on, because the way that the girls are comparing you to China, and if you don't know who China is, she was a WWE Hall of Famer, one of the best female wrestlers that we have or had. I was just like, yeah, this is kind of giving China-esque. All Emily needed was a bang wig, okay? One thing I find interesting about Emily's storyline this season is the way that people are reacting to it. I've seen a lot of people criticize the way that Emily is going about talking about this story. Some people feel as though it is very exploitive because, Luke is only 10 years old and he doesn't really have a say on, being on camera or what can be shown on camera. But then I understand that piece, but I also wonder, we always stress about how we want the women to have real storylines and talk about what's really going on in their lives. And this is a real storyline. I didn't really see a lot of people being that upset about Robert Jr.'s storyline with Mary dealing with a son that's a drug addict. And people questioning if she was exploiting him because he's under the influence. Can he really sign off or agree to this? Like, I didn't see her catch that much flack. And I wonder if it's because people actually like Mary Crosby versus a lot of people not liking Emily, or does it really have something to do with the age of the boys? Because I think Roberts Jr. last season was like 22 or 21. And then we have Luke, who's 10 years old. I just think it's interesting because I do understand what people are saying, but I'm also like, well, y'all do scream about and we do argue and get angry when we see girls bring us fake storylines, and this storyline is real. Like, there are people who do have this disorder. There are families struggling with children with this disorder who also have autism. So is she wrong for showcasing this story, especially when we ask for these types of real authentic stories? I don't know. So the next scene we get is of Jen and Ryan at the gym. They trying to get, wedding fit because Ryan wants Jen to get married to him in a swimsuit. Jen doesn't feel like her body is ready. Ryan reassures her that no, you're hot, your body is beautiful. But Jen is also bothered at the fact that Tamra would go around showing these fat photos of her, and she's over it. She's like, why? What would the purpose of doing that? Like, I already have insecurities. Why would you do something like that? As they finish up their workout, they start to talk about Jen's ex-husband, Will. Ryan wants to have a conversation with Will because we find out that the lump sum that Jen was supposed to get, which was $200,000 and the $6,000 a month child support, she has not received from Will, which I'm like, wouldn't he be in jail? Because isn't that a court order? But Ryan is over it. Ryan is over it because he's picking up the slack that Will is not doing. That's why Ryan was calling that man a deadbeat in the nicest way possible in that confessional, because he's the one helping Jen out. And Jen ends up saying like she doesn't understand why Will has not paid her yet. And I'm like, girl, I don't understand why you not down at the courts filing a report so you can get him locked up, okay? Because Will's response to this is like, well, I'm doing the best I can. I'm paying for, car insurance and tuition. You filed a letter, like you filed for a loan. Car insurance is not taking care of your actual children. You only have one child that's in college. The other one is about to go into the military. What are you talking about, bro? What are you talking about, Will? Are you serious, bro? And so Ryan is like, I want to have a conversation with him. And Jen is like, he's not going to listen to you because Will is the type of person that cares a lot about his image and he likes to control the narrative. So he's not going to speak to you. So then the conversation shifts where Jen basically thanks Ryan for being open and willing to share his feelings with her because she was married to Will for 20 years and he never wanted to talk about his feelings. She also expressed how the only way that she could get his attention is if she got naked in front of him. And that's when he would take his, his earpods out. He would give her all his focus. And she was just like, I love the fact that you stress how we should be living authentically as ourselves. And we're honest about these things. She was like, I'm not worried about getting married again. She's like, I'm scared about getting a divorce because divorces freak me out. You are my forever. And Ryan just kind of looked at her like, okay, girl, that's a bit much, but I see you. She even reiterates in her confessional where she's like, I'm not scared about marriage. I'm scared about a marriage that does not work out. And I just feel like, girl, women like that scare me because that means you'll put up with a shitty situation just so you don't have to go through a divorce. And I'm going to be honest, Ryan seems like an okay guy, but I still get scammer and sleazy vibes from him. So the next scene we have is with Gina and Shannon. They're eating pizza at Shannon's house. Mind you, they had to do the callback to when Shannon was like, this isn't even my plate, you stupid effing bitch. To Katie, when Katie was like, maybe you need to eat something. Because Shannon had so many plates in her house. And I think Gina was like, I didn't even know you like plates. I thought you didn't like plates. So they sit down and they just start talking. They're talking about Shannon's dating life. And Shannon is like, I actually like being single. And Gina was like, well, what about Adam and Phil? And Shannon was like, Adam and Phil don't want a relationship with me. They don't want to be intimate with me. And then Gina brings up Tamara bringing up Jen's fat photos, and Shannon is like, Tamara's the type of person that can dish it, but she can't take it. And I do agree with that. We've seen Tamara be nasty and mean to people multiple times, and then when they hit her back and they're nastier or meaner to her, she freaks out. And it's like, girl, why be mean if you can't handle somebody being mean back to you or meaner? That's the weird thing with Tamara. I feel like Tamara thinks like if I hit you with like level 5 meanness and with remarks and all of that stuff, then you should hit me with the same level of nastiness. But then if you hit her back with like say level 8 or 9, all of a sudden you're horrible. And it's like, well, no, you don't get to dictate how people respond to disrespect. You don't. So you might want to just try being kind to people. I don't know. So then Gina is in her confessional saying, for someone that keeps saying that they're growing and changing and going through all this therapy, it doesn't really scream growth if you're running around showing somebody's fat photos. And I want people to understand, just because somebody is in therapy doesn't mean that the change happens overnight. And it also doesn't mean that they can't multitask and still be a dick. So the conversation continues on with Gina talking about Travis and how, unfortunately, Gina and Travis have yet to see his son for the past 3 weeks, as the boy is supposedly at his mom's house, but the mom is not making him go to school. So he hasn't been in school for 3 weeks. And I'm like, I don't know, but in my state, you get the police called on you. And legit, if you don't have a reason why your child is not in school, whether like it has to be like they're sick or something or they're missing, but if you just are not allowing your child to go to school, I think you get a fine and possible jail time as a parent for truancy. So I'm like, why has Travis not taken his ex-wife or soon to be ex-wife to court? And Gina is just like, she doesn't know. She feels as though she's walking on eggshells with this situation. She's like, I either have to live apart from Travis and not be happy, or live together and deal with this lady. And I'm just like, is Travis really worth all this hassle? And Shannon even brings up how David, her ex-husband, said to his daughters, which to me is messed up, is the best way to hurt Shannon would be to take things away from them. So I don't know if that is what Travis's ex is doing, but I just don't understand why we haven't taken her to court if the child has not been seen in 3 weeks and is not going to school. And Gina is like, I'm wondering if I'm going to have to maneuver this for the rest of my life. Girl, leave him. I don't know. No, ma'am, you're not going to be causing chaos and confusion in my life like that. So it's now time for the ladies to go down to New Orleans. We see beautiful like B-reel footage of the different people that live down in New Orleans and things of that nature. We find out that Gina, Emily, Katie, and Gretchen were on the first wave of people getting to New Orleans. So they get there earlier in the day, and they're all flying first class. They're all talking about how they wonder how Shannon, Tamara, Jen, and Heather are going to do. We see Shannon in the airport, and I don't know what place she was at, but she was buying Spanx, and she basically says she wears Spanx every day, so she likes to see what other types of things they have. Girl, that has to be so uncomfortable to wear Spanx every single day. So uncomfortable. Tamara looks bored. We find out that the ladies are staying at the Four Seasons, and Emily and Gina are sleeping in the same room. I was like, I don't think it's wrong for them to sleep in the same room, but I would not want to sleep in the same bed as my friend. Girl, I want my own space. Give me my bed by myself. But they refer to each other as Bert and Arnie. Gina basically says that she is, I think, Bert, which is, I think, the long one, the yellow puppet. And then Emily said that she would be Bert because she's fat. She just needs a tan. I said, okay. The rooms are actually kind of nice. The carpet is horrible, though. But the rooms are nice. So we find out that the 4 girls who got there earlier, they're going to go on a riverboat. They get on this boat and they call it the Creole Queen. What was crazy is them trying to figure out what river they were on. And I was like, well, I know it's not the Potomac River because that is in like the DMV area. So I was like, what does the Potomac River? I don't know if the Potomac River connects. I don't think it connects to the Mississippi River, but you had Gina calling it the Bayou. And then they finally asked someone and they were like, oh, it's the Mississippi River. And Katie was like, I'm not good at geography. So then Katie says in her confessional, like, we all know I'm not good at geography because they bring up what happened last season where her and Kylie, her daughter, were getting ready for her to go to London for that cash trip. And she was like, you could train to like Paris. And Kylie was like, I think London is like an island. And I was like, I think so too. So I ended up Googling Great Britain, and Great Britain is an island. So I was like, yeah, girl, I think you meant like when you get to France, you can get on a train and and go to different countries, but not, not in the UK. And that tickled me. That actually tickled me. So while the girls are on the boat, Emily ends up starting this conversation where she says that she has had a conversation with Jen. They went horseback riding, and she was like, she was telling her that Shannon keeps saying to her, don't roll on me, And we see Emily in the confessional basically saying Shannon likes having allies. They actually show us the flashback of Jen where she was like, Shannon constantly tells me, like, don't switch up on me, don't roll on me. And so Emily states how like that's the exact opposite of what she's trying to do in this group. Like Emily is like, we're just trying to bring the group together a little bit more, which is kind of crazy when you think about how Emily isn't willing to really make amends with Katie. It's just kind of like, how are you going to be the one to bring the group together when you won't even have a genuine conversation with Katie? Or let go of the hurt feelings you have about Katie. So then Gina interjects and she was like, well, we understand the issues that you have with Tamara, Gretchen. We're just trying to start off small with bringing the group together. So we were trying to start on Jen and then come to you because we know you guys have history. So then Gretchen, does Gretchen have a lisp or is it her nose? I don't know. I just don't remember Gretchen sounding like this in the earlier seasons. But she was like, I hear you guys. I hear what y'all are trying to say. And she's like, honestly, y'all, I have been praying to God to like open up my heart and things of that nature. She states in her confessional, she was like, the Bible asks us to forgive, but it does not ask us to reconcile with people. And she was like, not reconciling with someone, I call that wisdom. And I would agree. Honestly, you don't have to forgive anyone, but I definitely wouldn't forgive somebody like Tamara after the history that her and Gretchen have had and expect her behavior to change or expect us to be friends, So we find out that the second group that has Heather, Shannon, Tamara, and Jen in it have just made it to New Orleans. And we see this kind of sweet moment where Tamara is trying to help Jen put her suitcase onto one of those little pushy things that is at the airport. And Jen was like, when me and Tamara are good, it reminds me of how much fun we used to have. And maybe we could be girlfriends again. But then there's this thing in the back of my brain that yells, be careful, be careful. And I'm always worried about the shoe dropping. So we see the other women get to their hotel room. Shannon had me tickle messing with her suitcase because that's me all the time. When you have the extra zipper that makes your suitcase bigger, I get so frustrated the way that she was getting frustrated. We then see Gina go to Tamara's room, and Tamara, you can tell, is nervous about going out to dinner with the women because she doesn't really want any drama. Gina keeps reiterating, we just want to have fun. Okay, so don't worry about any drama happening. We then see Katie go to Jen's room and she talks about how excited she is to see her. And she does say that the pictures were brought up. The pictures that Tamara was showing Heather is brought up. And she was like, everybody thought it was unfair that she did that to you. And they show us a flashback scene of Gina saying, like, what concerns me is she has this tendency to apologize, but then she repeats the same behavior and it's not really fair. You know what I'm saying? And Gretchen was like, that's my issue with her. She wants to move forward, but yet you still do these things to people that you claim to move forward with. So then Jen is like, what do we do? Do we sit her down and have a conversation with her and tell her that her apologies mean nothing? because she repeats the same behavior. My thing about it is I wouldn't expect an apology for somebody like Tamra. I feel like y'all know who Tamra is. Y'all know her apologies mean nothing. So I wouldn't even accept an apology from her because you know she's going to repeat the same behavior. So then that would, and honestly, that would leave you in the clear to be on that lady's neck until the end of times because you know her apologies mean nothing. So I wouldn't even harp on her apologizing to me if I was any of them. So we see the ladies get in their nice outfits to head out to dinner. We see Shannon got her cootie cat out, okay? And they pull up to this one restaurant and they are greeted by the hostess by the name Drew. He ends up showing them this table that they set up for, I guess, the owner who is deceased, or maybe the actual restaurant is in the guy's residence. His name is Pierre, and they show the table and everything. Gretchen did have me tickle when she was like, "The only ghost I believe in is the Holy Ghost," and I was like, "That's something my grandma would say." I thought that was funny. So we see the women sit down. They're all ordering drinks and things of that nature. You see Heather talk about, I wonder if I would ever come back and haunt Chateau de Bro to see like where people are putting their stuff. And then they end up showing Heather as a ghost. And she's like, ooh, I don't know why that tickled me either. So they're sitting down. They're all ordering. We meet their server, Joe. Now, one thing that was weird to me is that all of them were upset about Gina ordering turtle soup. Now, I've never had turtle soup, but like I am from the South and there are some parts of my family that are a part of the deep South and they eat turtle soup. A lot of them have compared it to what Gina has said. It does have like a clam chowdery kind of taste. So, I mean, I don't like clam chowder, so I would have been Katie. I wouldn't have tried it, but I was just like, for them to be like, oh my God, you're going to really eat turtle? Yeah, girl, it's turtle soup. Let's call it a day. So they're all having a good time talking and everyone's making fun of Gretchen in her, Carmen Sandiego hat. Tamara's in her confessional saying that she bought the outfit off of Shein. And then next thing you know, they all start asking everyone, how have they been? Jen lets them know that Ryan actually had a conversation with Will, but it practically went nowhere. Emily basically says, if he hasn't paid you child support, girl, he should be in jail. And I said, he should be in jail. Then we end up hearing Jen say in her confessional that because Ryan had this conversation with Will and Will likes to control everything, he's probably going to do something to get her back. She's just waiting for him to like block her. So then Katie talks about how she feels bad for Ryan because Matt, her husband, was in the same place with her ex-husband. She talks about how they were in the process of the custody agreement and Katie's ex-husband called, cussed her and Matt out and like hung up the phone and kind of like severed communication for a while. So Katie basically reiterates in her confessional that she hopes that Ryan doesn't start to resent Jen because she got lucky that Matt really does care about her and her kids. So Gina chimes in about her situation with Travis and not being able to see her stepson, as she calls him. We also find out that the ex was contacting Gina's son. When I tell you, I would click out on that lady because what are you doing contacting my minor son? Like, what's wrong with you, lady? Like, what was going on with you? That's why I could not be Gina, because we would not be together, because you're not going to take me through all of that. I refuse. I refuse. So we actually get a flashback scene of her calling Travis, cussing him out, basically saying that, like, you need to get her because she's calling my son, and that's unacceptable. And so Heather's like, that's outrageous. I think Joe, the waiter, accidentally spills something on Heather, or something happens to where she gets a drink on her, and everyone blames it on Pierre. Then we start talking about how everyone's having fun that night. They all start talking about like their favorite sexual positions. We see Emily and Tamara getting on the floor and, reenacting sex from the side. We find out that Jen's, hoo-ha from pelvic surgery is like closed. Like the only thing that can get in is the tip. And I said, oh my God, lady. Okay. And then they start talking about like what would be the perfect man for Shannon and all of that stuff. And then things were having a good time until Shannon wanted to be shady, where they asked Heather, like, has she ever recorded herself of her and Teddy? Like, have they ever created a sex tape? And Heather was like, no. And Katie was like, you haven't? And Heather's like, have you? She was like, yeah. And then Shannon's like, of course she has, because she records everything. And it gets awkward at the table. And I said, that was actually good shade. But I was like, Shannon, we were all having a good time. Having a good time. So Katie basically says in her confessional, like, when is she gonna let this go? Like, she's not gonna let this go because she just wants to have something to complain about. And then the episode pretty much ends like right there. We do see it speed up 24 hours later, and the girls go from laughing to cussing each other out, and Tamara, pretending to quit. But that's all I got for you guys. As always, remember to be bravely authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below. Subscribe. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.